You know, walking down Kearney Street is a microcosm of life in San Francisco. The place is like a grand experiment. You got the constituents, so funny, right? You got the tech bros, finance bros that give the tech bros money, and then the marginalized, and then the grand experiment playing out on the street with cars that go backwards and forwards and Waymos. Then the odd guy taking a shit on the street. It's just
They still have that. They still have the shitting on the street. I thought that guy, Daniel Laurie.
No, it's not gone. There's a lot of zombies still in San Fran.
Really
It's
remarkable
a
that
very strange place.
we haven't gotten that under control.
And then all kinds of sort of NPC kind of conference attenders mulling around with the lanyards at the Snowflake conference.
Aptly named.
And also, by the way, it's such a great, beautiful place. It's so filled with contrasts, but fucking it be cold sometimes in the summer. Oh my God.
Coldest winter ever spent was the summer in San Francisco. Welcome to People vs. Algorithms, show about detecting patterns, media, technology, culture, money, spirituality.
We find the patterns so you don't have to.
This is Troy Young. He's on the road. He's in undisclosed location in San Francisco. And right around the corner, Alex Schleifer is joining us from his
I like his
home
t-shirt today. That's a nice t-shirt.
bunker.
Thank you.
Is that branded? What is that?
No, it's just it's a place in Joshua Tree that sells those. Oh,
You know what? Just a little promotion. Alex, I had not fully grokked all the dimensions of your game until I watched the latest trailer. It is unbelievable.
Well,
I had to
thank you.
post it in field notes. I cannot wait to play this game. It's the first game I've been excited about in forever. There are so many little ideas, like when you hit the ball, Alex, and the tee flops into the river. So cool.
Yeah.
It's such a cool idea.
Alex, can you explain? It's called Ballgame. Can you just talk to us? Because, I have gotten notes from, there are a lot of Alex super fans out there, or they're just very vocal. Brad Robertson, noted PvA super fan, and a registered Alexista. He wrote in to say how useful you are as a foil to Troy. Now,
That's
a lot of
all,
people
though.
wonder about
just the foil.
Yeah, that's
your
that's what
video game, but you're more than that. You're so this is the first time I really saw it. I actually was really interested in this as a non-video game guy, because this is my kind of video game. Can you explain what Ballgame is?
It's like a 2D game, like a Super Mario game for those who might need some context. It's built in a 3D world, so it looks really lush, but it's actually a golf game that's played at the speed of pinball. It's a physics simulation, and what we're doing is taking a concept which we felt was very fun, which was bouncing a ball. Shooting and bouncing a ball is a very fun kind of little loop. Then we kind of just went down that rabbit hole and built something around that. And it's been, it's
Isn't there a
lot.
story behind it all, though, Alex? Aren't you pursuing, the final boss or whatever?
Yeah, there's a story. You wake up as a sentient golf ball in a hotel for lost balls, and there's a mystery to unravel. There's a cosmic crow that runs heists. There are merchant musicians that are groups of bugs that run around the hotel and trade with you. It's been a very fun time to build this. I really wanted to have fun with it, and I think we all are. So that's great.
Okay, great. We will leave a link to the trailer, and it's on YouTube. Obviously.
I'm bad at selling my own stuff. It's great. Everybody should wishlist it. It makes a lot.
You got to work on that. We decided to make this thing is not the best.
Why can't I play it on my phone, Alex?
You might be. I mean, true story. First version of the game was going to come out on iPhone. But now we're going to launch on Steam and then probably phones and things like that.
Yeah, the boomers. Don't worry, Troy. You and your boomer colleagues will get access to it on your iPads.
Don't call me a boomer, dude.
Toots
Not a
sweet.
boomer.
I think for the audience, what I'd like to do, I feel awkward shilling my game here because I know a lot of folks don't even play games, but it would be really interested to deep dive into the economy of games, the entire games industry, media ecosystem, and platform ecosystem is massive, and I think we can learn a lot from it. There's so many things that are, just really interesting about how that works, and it's its own microcosm. So I'd love to dive into that.
I love that idea, and we will do a theme episode on that. I will need to prepare by doing in-depth research, aka Claude, because I know nothing about this area. I just like
And I think there's a lot of maybe connections and takeaways that people in other parts of media.
Yeah, no, I think so. And look, there's monetization mechanisms within gaming that absolutely the media world should have learned long time ago, because guess what? Gaming is way more successful. We got to start with a correction. It's a big one, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I stepped into this. I mean, look, we're not about blame here. Absolutely not. But it's not my fault. He Gets Us was not from the Mormons. It was.
Who
it was
said
more,
that on
it
the
was,
pod? I just want to
Not me.
Did,
That's all
did I
know.
say
It was
that?
one of you.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me either.
It was from an evangelical
AB.
Yeah. Well, blame AB for that. So apologies for getting that wrong. Although I do think that's an interesting counterpoint of using, the traditional methods of running a Super Bowl ad versus the earned media that comes from having the Pope as a character, because, evangelicals are decentralized and that has a lot of advantages. And, but the Pope is a character. That's an advantage. These days, you need characters. Apologies again for the mistake.
Way to channel observations from the religious world back into commerce. Way to go.
That's what I do. I try to. Let's get into the AI stuff. AI regulation has arrived. David Sachs has lost this battle. To me, this was always inevitable. You can chime in after I do this, Troy. That's fine. The government took its first tentative steps into regulating AI. I don't think the details are actually that important. It's really about the precedent. This was inevitable. AI regulatory boards are going to happen. It's just a matter of when and in what form. Next down the pike is going to be child safety and the impacts that AI is having on the development of children. This is a general purpose technology that touches on way more constituencies than just the San Francisco-oriented tech elite. And guess what? Tech is going to find out, if it isn't already, it is one of many power centers and constituencies, and that is how society works. That's just how the political system works, and it's going to be complicated and messy. Troy, you had something to say.
Well, I kind of thought it was a victory for Sachs because, a 30-day period is ridiculous. Maybe they'll sort of instrument something that allows you to come up with some insight as to the risks of a model in 30 days, but you can't get your learner's license in that period. So I don't really know what it seems like. It was a massive comp. The only thing that it's worth highlighting, Brian, is that a national policy would be extremely valuable. If you've ever had to manage the consent layer on a website against patchwork of rules between Europe and the US, and the threat of California stepping in and making it even more complicated in the U.S. for publishers. That in America it would be amazing to have consistent policy across this.
Yeah, to me the important thing is just the precedent it sets for government involvement in the direction and of the diffusion of this technology. I mean, to me it was always inevitable. You cannot have this thing that you quote unquote discovered and claim it's going to change how society works. And then the government's going to be like, oh, go out, go for it. That doesn't matter to us. It's just the same as the crypto idiots, thinking that they could make an entirely new monetary system and do away with fiat currencies, and governments to be like, sure, absolutely, Binance, you should totally do that. We don't need to actually control money.
Would love your take, but the cynical side of me that says it will all be for nothing. And people will, increasingly use open source models in the way they want to use them. And that the technology, the genie's out of the bottle technology is not going to be hemmed in by regulation. So I think it's all going to be just a bunch of waving. And I haven't thought about it enough to really understand how regulations are going to pragmatically, they're going to change, the diffusion of the technology. I think the one thing that we'll see real focus on, and maybe this is an area where it will be useful, is in how we manage the technology around children.
For sure, but yes. I think that I think there were probably three events that had happened because I do see this as a reversal in the way they were handling things. It doesn't seem to be that restrictive, but when you're seeing all the data coming back about how unpopular this is, the AI stuff is, I think the governments, and you're trying to be a populist government, you're kind of incentivized to give people a bone and just tell them, look, we did something. And the other thing is, like, I do think that the mythos thing scared the shit out of people. Like, you remember when the Claude mythos came out? It hasn't been released yet.
Well, it scared the shit out of the quote unquote right people. It got Jamie Dimon on the phone with the White House. It got Scott Bessent, who has emerged. He's my favorite character in the Trump cabinet, by the way. Scott Bessent. He's funny. Yeah, no, he's smart. He's actually qualified for his job, and he's a little bitchy. I kind of like that.
Man after your own heart.
Did you see what he said?
Great irony, Brian. The great irony in all this is I cannot get flavored zins in California. I just had to go get some zins for this podcast, and I had to go into a dirty back room behind a bunch of curtains to get some zins.
Wow.
It makes them taste
Imagine
better.
what they're going to do to AI. Imagine what they're going to do to AI. I think that's an interesting point, Alex. And I think it comes at, this is the pressure of the narrative shifting with AI. I mean, I just published a newsletter that sort of euphemistically was everybody hates AI. And basically I was thinking about all the different people who have beef with AI at this moment, all the different groups. So we have AI is polling worse than ICE. Young people hate AI because it's compressing their future prospects. Workers hate AI because its makers tell them it's going to take their jobs. Parents hate AI for screwing up their kids' education. Journalists hate AI, obviously, for any number of reasons. Companies hate AI because it costs so much money and they're not seeing productivity gains from all the spending. Managers hate the tsunami of AI work slop that has invaded corporate life. And pretty much everybody, and even LinkedIn, hates AI on LinkedIn. Creative people hate AI for commoditizing art. And the Pope doesn't hate AI because he's not allowed to hate things, but he has serious concerns of it. So
that was good, Brian. Who loves AI? Who loves AI, Brian?
The most powerful people love AI. And that is why I'm on the side of this is just a restraining sort of thing as we diffuse this technology. I do believe power ultimately wins in the long run. OpenAI is coming out with, have you seen these ads that they have? They're trying to make AI a warm and fuzzy. I find it funny. It's they're highlighting how it can basically be a shortcut to a recipe or coming up with a road trip itinerary. And this is kind of weird in some ways because they were basically claiming that they were building this demigod that they discovered. They didn't invent, they discovered it, right?
Yeah. They woke it up.
Yeah. And now we're back to, hey, you get some recipes, you get a road trip.
Because, Brian, the language that you use when you're raising money and you're trying to get governments to do your bidding is digital god. And the language you use when you want to sell a product to consumer is, shopping list.
Yeah,
that's the thing, right? They're talking from both sides of their mouth. And I think the digital god narrative has taken over. The one thing that you didn't mention in your list of why people hate it, one of the big ones is kind of the emotional concerns about kind of emotional reliability, right? The amount of parents who know nothing about AI, who talk to me because I'm the tech guy and are worried about AI boyfriends and girlfriends is incredible. Incredible. Nearly everyone I've spoken to.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm not a parent. I think
do you
this
know
is
a lot about that,
overhang.
Alex? AI girlfriends?
AI wives.
I think it's a bit too simplistic to list out all the haters without figuring out why people love it. And it's not just the power people. Lots of people love it in corporations. Lots of people like me like it for, it empowering you in new ways to make things. Lots of creative people.
Nobody's
like
denying that it's actually maybe a strange and interesting occurrence.
You love it, Alex. You love AI.
Yeah, I love AI like I love the internet. I don't love 4chan. I don't think anybody's denying that it's incredibly useful, and people find it, all sorts of little uses for it. Some of them, profound with an organization, the coding stuff specifically, and some of them very light. Everybody that complains about AI that I know also uses it to, help summarize long documents or check some legal thing. Like it's all astounding that we can do that. But the sentiment around everything that surrounds AI, the corporations, the data centers, the trillionaires, I think that's kind of the chance of it potentially destroying, humanity. I think people are seeing it as as something that they use, but also wish didn't exist, and that's, I think, is interesting.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're at the start of a lot of these IPOs coming out. I mean, Anthropic confidentially filed for its S1, and SpaceX is telling an AI story, the data centers and space stuff, right? And OpenAI is going to quickly follow with its own IPO. Now, I don't know whether that impacts this narrative problem that exists with AI. There's a school of thought, which I find fairly far-fetched, is that one of the reasons that there isn't as large of a constituency that's pro AI, except for the boss class and oligarchic types and growth hackers, is that the public has not had access to this immense amount of wealth that is being created. Like, there's a lot of people making a lot of money, but it's not that many people. It's a fairly small group when you compare it to the overall population. Now, Bernie Sanders is out there with a very simple proposal. He's saying, give us 50% of the shares in a sovereign wealth fund. Sam Altman got a suit on even, and this week he's meeting with Bernie. Troy, you must be behind this idea of taking half the shares of these AI companies and putting them in a sovereign wealth fund.
I've learned not to make policy recommendations on this podcast, lest I feel both of your wrath. It seems like a kind of a cool idea. Kind of a cool idea. We did talk about it, and I think you said it was your idea before, Brian. Some type of
I don't think I'm
tax
the first person to come up with that.
No, but some type of tax on AI workers, which would just feel somehow equitable. Trump was, I would say Bernie's idea is kind of Trumpian in the government taking equity positions and operating inside of the sort of capitalistic mechanism or framework. I think it's kind of a cool idea. I mean, one of the great things that I think Trump, of all the crazy policy stuff he's done, this idea of a savings account for babies is a nice idea. And if we could figure out how to kind of turn all of this equity appreciation or this complete, capital shift into something that made everyday folks a little better off, I would support that for sure. Yeah. I like that idea.
I don't trust the government taking the money and then spending it, quote unquote, on behalf of people. But no,
give it to the people. I like it. Though, Brian, before we move on that, I've been working with a team this week in San Francisco to sort of think through a number of issues in the business, including how it should respond, structurally to all this AI stuff. This work slop thing is very interesting to me. And I asked a group of people, executives of this company, to send me memos. I gave them an outline in advance of the meeting. I wanted them to think through a number of issues. And I said, send me a couple page memo. And getting it back was very revealing of the times we're in, because so many of them were clearly written by AI.
I hate it.
AI assisted. And that's what you call work slop. And so I think it's funny, right? It's like, why have someone send you something that they, prompted when you could just prompt it yourself?
People are commoditizing themselves.
Well, what does it do, though, is what I was kind of contemplating on the way here this morning, which is like this kind of, like a memo that you haven't really thought through, and that, I could have just got by writing a prompt, is not adding a lot of value to a company. So what does it do as, people get smart to that? How does it change how people operate inside of a company? And because I think there was always a lot of performative stuff in companies. All the meetings that you do where people present.
You think, Troy?
Okay, but just think about working in big companies and all the meetings and all the presentations and all the memos that all kind of amount to a fart. They're nothing, right? It's like, did you see the problem a different way? Did you come up with a clever solution? Can it be executed? Did you actually execute it? Were there results? Did you make something nice? Did you make something that's going to change the fortunes of the company or change the way people see it, whatever, right? But like all that other stuff in between, which is sort of the thing that a lot of people do day to day when they go to work or when they manage or when they attend meetings and when they posture, is now being exposed for what it is, which is just bunkum. It's nothing. And what I think AI does is just say that this is just a waste of time. I just kind of wonder if ultimately the reaction to that is like, listen, all that other stuff that we used to do, in the kind of management ranks and day-to-day organizations is just kind of a waste of time. And it really, what matters is what are we doing to actually improve, the results for customers, employees, stakeholders, et cetera. And I think that's ultimately how it nets out. I would
agree on that. There's little doubt this is like pulling back the curtain on a lot of performative work. Look, a lot of these job cuts are, AI is being used as a cover. We've talked about this repeatedly. Although the AI jobs apocalypse, it's funny because the narrative is, at least from my point of view, it's decidedly negative on AI. But at the same time, like the biggest fear of AI, which is massive job displacement, simply has not happened. We haven't seen it. There's people are going to the anecdotes of usually tech companies cutting thousands of workers. And we've discussed it ad nauseum that these companies clearly overhired. They were stockpiling quote unquote talent, either because they wanted to avoid regulation or whatever. Okay. Because they didn't need all these people because they had monopolies a lot of times. And economists have always said, look, economists never forecasted massive job loss. They never did. And we're not seeing the massive productivity gains yet, but we're not seeing massive job loss at all. And so in some ways, like that AI should have wind at its back because there are signs even that is expanding employment in some of the areas that it was supposed to destroy those jobs. So what's going on that front, do you think, Troy? Because you've been vocal about, that the job apocalypse was overrated.
I don't want to be a fake expert here, but my observation is, first of all, it makes lots of mistakes. And so you can't have technology in critical places replacing humans when it's incapable of basic judgment. So, I think that's a bit of a restraint driven by this, maturity of the technology. I think it's an assistant before it's a replacement. And so, it's going to change how we work, but not necessarily replace the jobs. I think enterprise adoption is always going to be, there's the early adopters and then there's normal people and there's enterprises. It takes a really long time to sort of infiltrate, enterprise processes and really make material changes to jobs. So I think that's just a timing thing. I think it's creating new work. Listen, there's so much new software. That's why we see this increase in demand for developers, right? That's the Jevons paradox thing where so much more software is being created that, when I make software, as you've now seen, my software isn't always ready for the real world.
It's a little buggy, Troy.
It's a little buggy, not terrible, but it's a little buggy.
This week was a step backwards. I know it's a journey, but it was a step backwards. But go on.
Well, sometimes, it's great to have you using it and we're working through the bugs. So we'll just leave it at that. And I really, really want, and this is from my heart, what I really want is Alex's comment, because Alex actually sees through the overall kind of fake utility of a product to get to what it really is. So this is where he'll say to me, is this just a blog?
Complimentary. That is complimentary to Alex. A little insulting.
Oh yeah, no, he's great at that shit. He's great at that shit, but it's sometimes it stings.
I can't be passive aggressive. I think that's what I think we're resolving an argument that Troy and I have been having live on air. This is turning into an episode of Dr. Phil or something. What are you in this case, Brian? You're some sort of love doctor.
Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
Wait, no. Oh, I was getting confused with Dave Ramsey, the guy who tells people to.
Well, other two quick points is that, I think a lot of what we've seen of these, the layoffs have been. I kind of agree with, hate to say it, with Chamath and Sachs on this one, where I think a lot of the layoffs, and I think Alex, you would agree too, have had nothing to do with AI. They're just adjustments to overhiring and to mismanagement.
Yes.
And
we've said
I
it too, you know? We've said it here.
yeah, and I think there's so much leverage in these tech companies where, a black box, controls, billions and billions of dollars of kind of economic value that the people around it, if you have the money to overhire and you also have the leverage to cut back massively without changing your revenue. So I think you're seeing that now. I don't know. I think as this capability gets cheaper and cheaper, we're going to see people use it in all kinds of weird ways, and it'll create jobs we never thought of.
But I think there will be very real job losses, but maybe we're not feeling them in the West, right? I think the ones that are coming are the type of labor that is kind of like support centers, right? All across India and even parts of Middle America where some people work from home. I mean, these things are definitely going to be hit if they're not already. I just don't think we see those reflected in the economy so much because so many of these jobs are abroad.
Yeah. But also let's be realistic. Every year, the United States economy destroys 20 to 23 million jobs. And guess what? It creates more. So that is the overall trend. So I think when, some tech company lays off 2,000 people, it's terrible for the people, obviously, who were laid off in the short term, although they will all find new jobs. But, that is just the churn of the capitalist machine. One thing I want to talk about a little bit is this idea of AI, portable AI memory. Gary Tan, who can sometimes present as a lunatic, I think made a very good point about the portability of memory. Now, one of the things of these LLMs and these chatbots, et cetera, is that it seems like there's a lot of leverage in continuing to use them because they remember, they'll always be like, oh, yes, I remember this and that. And like, that's the lock-in because it's, the switching costs are trivial. And we've seen before about how Silicon Valley tech platforms have used various forms of lock-in to trap people, right? And I think this idea of memory portability makes complete sense. And I also think it'll never happen. Alex, am I wrong here?
What define never happen?
I mean that there's too many interests into creating moats. Okay. Silicon Valley hates competition. And I don't see this movement gathering any steam whatsoever because there's been so much commoditization that is happening already that, I don't know why anyone would go along with the idea of Anthropic just wants you to use Claude and have your entire life within Claude. OpenAI, the same with ChatGPT.
This is one of those questions that you need to answer. Like, will it be, where are we at today? If you look at where we are at today, a tool like Gary Tan's is actually useful and provides some utility that you don't have with just like a raw LLM. The portability is baked into it. But what you can see here is that memory is the biggest, I think it's definitely the biggest moat you have. Once a user has spent time with you, I think I've had to get a lot of people from moving away from ChatGPT into Claude. Thankfully, those tools just do anything you tell them. So you can say, help me export my entire memory, and it'll help you do that. Yeah, however, none of these companies are going to be incentivized to open that up because you want to make sure that, people are loyal. I think that the thing that will change, which we haven't seen completely yet, is when iOS fully integrates AI in a way that is compelling. Because right now, everything is like you're still going through an app and then you connect, you start connecting all your Gmail and your documents and all of these things to that app. And sure, there's like some cost to that. But the second it becomes baked into the interface and the first button you see or the physical button on the phone just talks to whatever AI setup and memory setup these guys have, I think that's what's going to change. And my worry is that we end up more and more beholden to like two companies, which is like Google and Apple, because they just manage and own.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would add a couple things to this, Brian. I think that it's really about, it is about memory, and there's nothing more infuriating than finishing a session on Claude and having to restart it and it not remembering anything that you had done before. and it has to go back and read the code base, and you have to rehash all of the things that you told it not to do in previous sessions. It's super aggravating. So memory in the context of like coding and stuff is really important. But I think that the real battle is, I don't know, there's people use the term harness, but it's really about the billions and billions of dollars spent on trading and inference and data centers needs to manifest in a product, yes, that is sticky, that people that are committed to and locked into. And it's really the battle right now I'm seeing is it's memory, but it's a bigger question of the product, and the product is an environment where you can, an operating system for knowledge work. And what's happened is Codex has leapfrogged conceptually what Claude is doing by the Claude desktop has 3 modes, right? It's got chat, it's got Claude Code, and it's got, what's the other one? Cowork. And that construct is unnecessary, right? Like you don't really need to, that's not how you work, right? No. You might ask it a question and do code and move back and forth, but you don't want to move between different interfaces. And so what Codex does is it blends that all together into kind of one environment with a preview browser. And it's sort of like your partner in your journey, whether you're doing code or asking questions or writing a document. And I actually think getting that product right with memory and with all the product features is really the battle right now. Because if you get that, there's real lock in there, because it becomes something that's kind of intimate to how you work. And it's absolutely essential for Google. I don't think Apple's really in the race for Claude and for OpenAI to get that intimacy with users, because that's the only way that they're going to get stickiness over time.
But if you think about it, like, imagine that interface. You said a single interface that basically does everything, because it does feel like that now, right? It's both magical and incredible that we can do this. And also I'm using Claude and I'm like, why do I have to switch windows? Why can this tab do this and this tab not do that? Why when I speak with voice to it, can it only do certain things and not others, right? And I think that there's a lot of restrictions because it's an app that exists on your computer and can only do this many things. I mean, OpenAI has managed to do more, and they've made some UI decisions to allow you to do that. But they'll always be kneecapped, right? Because at the end of the day, Apple will say, no, you don't have to go into the text box that's inside the app. You just go into our text box. You press
it's just that it's harder than that, Alex. Is the technology is actually and Apple is got along.
But yes, and so Apple has made a deal, and we're very close to WWDC, and the Apple deal is with Google. Like I think if Apple has Google and Google has Google, and they both own the operating systems, I don't know. I think it's like 3 years ago, I was like, maybe we were going to see Google dance, right? That was the Satya Nadella quote. Google is poised to dominate this space because they will own memory. They already own your Gmail. They already own your Google Docs.
Yeah. They got to take Gemini out of Google Docs. Just stop it. Get it away.
Google is only in its own way because it's an ungovernable kind of collection of fiefdoms that kind of mildly cooperate when they have to put a keynote together. Dude. But if they actually had the focus, but they always get there in the end, but it feels like
they've become Microsoft. Remember when they were like the alternative to Microsoft? It was like, oh, thank God, Google, like Microsoft was they became Microsoft. Let's put a pin in that, as they said.
No, but one last little footnote on this, Brian. No. But the one thing about memory is very intimate with the user, right? It remembers what you did. It remembers real things that are really important to you. One thing I like about my mother right now, I love my mother, but she doesn't remember anything. So she doesn't remember if I didn't call her. Sometimes that's convenient. The thing that I find weird about memory in these systems is when they get it wrong. And when they use memory to imply a need that I don't really want them to ask me about. So lately they've been saying, oh, I noticed that you're going on this trip to Italy because you're interested in, Italian history or Roman history. Perhaps you want to look at something this way. And I'm like, fuck off. Like, I don't want you to talk to me like that. Yeah, so memory can be kind of weird.
I actually had and then we will move on. I fooled Claude into telling me the truth. I was preparing for a podcast and I was like, I'm a little skeptical about this, blah, 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 blah. And then I did the podcast and I uploaded the transcript, but I didn't make it clear that it was like the conversation I already had. And it thought it was just an additional piece of context from a different conversation. And so it started criticizing my questions and what I got. I was like, don't make these mistakes. Don't do like this Brian guy did. And I was like, I'm Brian. And then it immediately switched into sycophancy.
It's like the Troy bot.
Anyway, let's move on to media drama. Okay. 60 Minutes is, I can't believe we're discussing 60 Minutes. Bari Weiss, her adventures continue. She has chosen war, as I saw mentioned. She is bringing in Nick Bilton to lead 60 Minutes, cashiering a bunch of longtime 60 Minutes executive producers and talent. Nick Bilton is a former New York Times tech columnist. I knew him like in the Web 2.0 era a little bit. He ended up moving on to like do screenplays and things, and he's coming back to run 60 Minutes. He has no experience in broadcast TV that I know of. This was another controversial hire. Bari Weiss is a classic disruptor, I guess. And Scott Pelley, who has been at 60 Minutes for 37 years, he did a classic burn the boats exit where he used Nick Bilton's first meeting to attack him, to attack Bari Weiss, to accuse her of murdering 60 Minutes. It was great drama. It could only end in one way, which is Scott Pelley getting fired, which he did. This is kind of part of how upheaval goes. Troy, you've been in the middle of, trying to change organizations. So I'm interested in your perspective on the challenges that Bari Weiss continues to face in trying to get her vision of where this brand needs to go. I mean, she's facing resistance seemingly across the board within CBS.
So many feelings. Maybe the first is Schadenfreude. Well, who wants a job? And it's nice to get, a kind of journalist to get a taste of their own medicine in a management role. That's what it feels like to have to change things against the desires of people that feel like they're heavily invested in a product. Scott Pelley, he may be, distinguished in all kinds of ways. I find him intolerable. And I think that he, if the style and the format of 60 Minutes is asking baby questions in a plotting way, then thank God that, someone's going to come in and mix it up, because that format doesn't fit a new generation of media consumers. So,
wait. I got to object here. 60 Minutes is not CNN and baby news. I mean, this is Morley Safer.
No.
I mean, they put people under, the gun.
Listen, love Morley Safer, Brian, but like, watch it. Just watch it. And the pacing and the interview and the interrogation style is off for the modern time. Like, I think it's fine. It's fine. Listen, Brian, it's
Jason Calacanis?
No. What you can do, it's perfectly fine for an aging media consumer, and you can ride that thing down and just keep going the way it is. And it has to a certain part of the population, has a great brand, and it's a format that they love, and it's a warm embrace. I get it. And sometimes I like it because I can watch 60 Minutes and do something else at the same time, because that's the pacing. But if, you'll recall that I suggested that what Bari should focus on is 60 Minutes. And I think that the challenge of modernizing that brand is massive. But if you want to change, the network, you have to take the brand, because it is truly a brand that is way more transcendent than, the newscast brand. And you need to figure out how to modernize it, which means it needs to become, omni-channel, and it needs to attract a younger audience, and it needs to become more vibrant, and it needs to be applied to all kinds of ways. So there's a huge change mandate for whoever's going to come in and change it. Now, all the people that are there, all the sort of, the talent as brands are going to resist that. And I think it's incredibly hard. My advice, having seen this firsthand, would be something I'm a little short of sometimes is you have to bring a huge amount of empathy to those meetings. That said, you may have to go slower than you think. And vitally, you need complete commitment from management, because as soon as management isn't behind you, you're fucked in the change program. But don't pretend that you're ever going to make friends. You're probably going to have to rip the Band-Aid off. And, it's going to be an ugly transition.
You're a shock therapy guy. You're a classic shock
it's
therapy
a weakness,
guy.
man. I'm trying to get beyond it, but it's a weakness.
No, it's an approach, right? Like when communism collapsed in Eastern Europe, there was two schools of thought. There was shock therapy, do it fast, rip the Band-Aid off, get all these state-owned assets into private hands. Don't worry about it. Clean it up later. And then there was the gradualist approach, being like, we gotta slow this down. We gotta be careful. We gotta protect, society and stuff like this. Different economies went different directions. The shock therapy approach, I don't know. It led to a lot of, oligarchs, a lot of entrenched interests doing insider deals and whatnot. It's not a perfect metaphor. Alex, where do you fall on this? I know this is you're just going to say this is all irrelevant. And to be fair, 60 Minutes average median viewer is 65 years of age, which as I get closer to that number, I think these people are very important.
I mean, it's hard to disagree with the basics of what Troy is saying, but that these changes need to happen. They're probably happening too late. It's really hard being a change agent in the company that, However, I still don't. I mean, have we seen her do anything that we feel is? Yeah, I've seen from where I'm standing. It feels like a lot of people are fired because they're not loyalists, and a lot of people are hired because they are loyalists rather than their talent. And I haven't seen anything that screams like.
Yeah. Is there a plan? I mean, is there what do we tangibly see? What that town?
I'm sure
hall?
there's a plan. It's not Bari's responsibility.
If they hire if they hired Callahan from Channel 5 News to run 60 Minutes, I would say that's cool. That's interesting. That's something.
Well, that's kind of what they did. That's kind of what they did.
What do you do?
Alex.
How about Scott Galloway as a 60 Minutes personality?
We need young people. We've seen it in the movie theaters. A Star Wars movie got beaten by two YouTubers. One's 20 years old and one's 24 years old. Okay?
Living with his parents, by the way.
Yeah,
Still living with his parents. And sadly, this story began in 4chan. So.
Well, it's creepypasta, right? I mean, we're throwing a lot of people here. There's a movie called Backrooms that started as creepy stories on places like 4chan and Reddit. And then this kid has been using open source software called Blender to make these videos on YouTube, which became a big hit. A24 just launched a movie with Blumhouse. It's a massive hit. And Gen Z is flooding to see it. It is possible. Turns out that they maybe didn't want to see Indiana Jones 7. Turns out that they didn't want to see, did
they bring Harrison Ford back to that? Can he still?
And the problem is that people who make these decisions, as always, are our age or older and so attached to nostalgia that they cannot see outside of it. I saw that there's a new John Rambo movie coming out with new actors. I don't know. I think
Rambo.
But whether it's Bari Weiss
we don't use his first name, Alex.
But that's what the movie's actually called. That's true. But the movie's actually called.
What is it? The young Rambo?
Yeah, it's a prequel. It doesn't matter. I think
is Sylvester Stallone doing it? He's only 70. He could still do it. He's in shape.
He's getting there. Yeah, he's in shape.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Alex, can you back up for me for a sec? I was blown away by the Backrooms trailer. It looks amazing. Yeah. Did you go see the movie?
No, not yet. But I've been watching back. I have the media tastes of a young millennial.
I know that. So this is a horror movie for Minecraft fans, is what my take was.
Well, I mean, I think it's more like, and it's very internet coded. It's these sub communities that talk about creepy things. There's entire ones that are about large structures that are submerged, large structures underwater, and all these types of creepy things. This was one of them about these liminal spaces that kind of look like our own, but feel like they're, detached from our reality and that we can access. And it's usually shot in, via some VHS camcorder. It's very kind of, Gen Z
Blair
millennial.
Witch.
Yeah, but in a way that is kind of like
Blair
that
Witch.
existential dread that really belongs in the 2020s, And I think it's very specific. But it's cool, right? It's
It really
exciting.
looked really cool. Yeah.
The average age was 25. Like the 86% were under 35. Going to an actual movie theater.
By the way, doesn't it just show how these, whoever's running these studios doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about?
David Zaslav? We've already covered this before.
The whole thing was everything needs to
titan.
move to streaming because young people don't want to go to the movies. Meanwhile, they were regurgitating 80s movies over and over to these kids and saying, "Why aren't you eating my slop?" Right? I used to eat this. Why aren't you eating this? And they just needed something
That
new.
triggers Troy. Slop, he doesn't like slop.
Do you want to get into it?
This is exciting.
Yeah, I want to get into it, Troy. Because, I think what we have, this is this part of elitist versus slopulous, AI writing, AI animation, AI photos. I mean, this stuff is being all positioned as down market, AKA slop. Martin Scorsese just, he came out with, he's just doing some small thing with AI. I chart anytime Variety mentions any sort of creative person using AI, I just go right to it's always ratioed. Now, maybe and I think of X as a very pro AI space, but elite culture is completely against the use of AI in the creative process. In fact, the Backrooms director came out about like how AI is terrible for creativity. And, this is summed up in your least favorite word, which is slop, unfortunately. I think it's a losing battle that you're fighting because I think the elitists might have a point here. And I think that we're looking at a space where slop is like junk food. Why am I wrong, Troy?
Because, first of all, just practically, I don't know how we, create mechanisms to judge what people should and shouldn't watch. And what is entertainment to some is not entertaining to others. And I think that, the market of tastes and the algorithm decide ultimately what people want to watch. I think that AI will manifest in some slop and, it will be entirely forgettable, and it will manifest in augmenting creative people in all kinds of amazing ways that will be totally democratizing. And, other people will go full vinyl record on it. And it's fine. But, Charlie Warzel, who I really like, going on for 3 pages about, with this kind of elitist point of view on slop, I find off-putting. I think that people react to content in all kinds of ways, independent of how it was made. And I just think, judging something based on whether it was made with a tool or not, or how a person ultimately came to, developing some type of output is futile, and it's fucking arrogant, actually, to dismiss it all because it wasn't handcrafted by a journalist at The Atlantic. So I just kind of disagree with the whole positioning of slop. It feels very Ryan Broderick to me, and it's like a person that hates everything. And I just react against that framing. That's all.
Okay. Backrooms director Kane Parsons said, if I could snap my fingers and make generative AI disappear forever, I probably would. Creatively, I get no enjoyment from using this tool.
Great, don't use it, buddy.
Entirely.
Fine. He made a good movie. Good on him. I'm sure he used AI in all kinds of ways he won't even admit.
But I mean, just not to be contrarian, I don't disagree. I feel like the anxieties that people have around this, or the repulsion to it, right? Because a lot of it is the language. It's the language of disgust that's being used on these things. And it is because the scale is different. It is because we live in a world where algorithms define what's popular, and this idea that we're going to flood these algorithms with slop is going to impact impact culture in ways. And it also, like, I think starts a real conversation around whether the value in art and media is directly connected to effort or not. You know, like, because there's a world where if you just have an idea, the thing will make it. But
Well, it's never been
like,
connected to effort, really, in modern times, Alex. Like Andy Warhol proved that, right?
Right, but like,
it's connected. It's connected to ideas. It's not connected to effort.
But bands make most of their money touring, right? And so, you know, Brian makes most of his money from webinars. Like the actual
That's not true. That's a lie. I have a diversified business model that involves party planning. It involves lots of other things.
It's not you don't get paid per word, right? Like the things where there's like text has already been decommoditized. The thing that is like always the most valuable is the thing that has scarcity and effort attached to it, right? Like, you know, these bands still tour. That's where they make their money because people want to see them sweat. And I think that's going to keep happening.
Yeah,
But,
you gotta sweat. That's the reality. By the way, this is a good time to mention it. I'm having like a media mixer in Cannes in a couple of weeks. So get in touch if you wanna, you know, if you wanna hang out in the Riviera. We've got limited spots.
You get a yacht, Brian?
No, but I'm doing a discussion about why AI is such like a horrible brand perception problem on a yacht, actually, with civic science.
A virtual yacht or a real one?
No, it's a real yacht. It's a real yacht. It's an early one, you know, because I think the real people in Cannes are up early, you know. They're not partying at the gutter bar till 5 a.m.
I've got a hard stop, but I'm going to just ask this one thing. Do you think that even Scorsese being, you know, nearly canceled because he mentioned that he used storyboarding app, do you think it's going to chill the kind of like celebrities attaching themselves to AI even more? I don't think we're going to see any celebrities chill AI stuff next Super Bowl like they did with Bitcoin and crypto.
There's just a lot of money to be made fronting AI, and the realist in me says that usually people go for the money.
I gotta say, you know, I don't think, you know, crypto and sports betting also not like super popular in people's sentiment, but it never stopped, you know, celebrities to line up to be in an ad for them. But I expect nobody's going to do that with AI.
Okay. I know you have a hard stop. AB is going to enter the chat. We're going to talk about People Inc. a little bit. But before he gets here, Troy, I want to talk about the World Cup is coming. The NBA finals are here, and we're kicking off. The summer has arrived. You know, you got an early start to it with your Euro maxing. The World Cup is going to be really fascinating here. It's arriving at a very strange time. I don't think the World Cup should be held in the United States, personally. It's better in other countries with more developed, like, soccer cultures. They call it football and whatnot. It all feels artificial here. There are these giant inflatable soccer balls around in Miami that are like half deflated because Iraq is playing against Colombia or someone here. It seems off. The NBA too is going through a very weird period of time right now. Victor Wembanyama is going to be the new face of the NBA, but you know, he's a super tall French guy. He doesn't have the same magnetism yet. I like him personally a lot. I don't know if people who are 7'7" get as much credit as like a Steph Curry and whatnot with fans. What is your take on the World Cup? I mean, because like it is, look, the pricing mechanisms that they're using have led to a lot of pushback on this, but maybe once the games start, people don't care.
It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be amazing. And there's always joy in the World Cup. It doesn't matter if it's in America. I think that the pricing issues around tickets have been, you know, horrible and mismanaged. Sports are for the people, right? They're not just for the elites. And so I find that to be problematic, but I think it's going to be a huge success. Just because the game and the competition will overtake all the negative sentiment. And the World Cup is such a great tournament. I'm very excited about it.
Are you going to any games?
Yeah, I'll probably go to a couple. I'm on the board of the
Matches.
soccer companies, so I I can get in.
You get in. Good. This is PvA OT with AB. We're just trying this new thing with the ending of PvA. To me, I think this is like sort of the more of the guest driven segment. So thank you for doing this. You know, some interesting news that came out this week was about People Inc. trying to basically take over MGM. They own, I think it was like 26% of it. Now, People Inc., you know, is the former Dotdash Meredith, which then, well, I mean, you keep going back. It was the IAC that became Dotdash Meredith, that is now People Inc. They've divested a lot of these assets, and now they're down to basically the publishing assets, which a lot of people in this podcast know. And then they had this MGM stake, and now they're looking to basically take over MGM. When I first saw this, my mind went to, are they using the cash flow from the publishing assets to get out of like publishing, to get into the real world assets? Because they're like, okay, we're doing a good job managing this transition into AI. They're starting to report. People Inc., I noticed at an investment conference, started to talk about its non-session revenue, which I thought was an interesting metric, just saying, hey, we're not tied to web pages. Now, its public reporting had always been around how many sessions it had, because sessions equaled revenue. And now it's, you know, trumpeting the fact that it has all this non-session revenue. Am I too much of a conspiracy theorist? What's going on here?
Okay, so IAC, or People Inc., still owns a couple of things. They obviously have People, and then they have like a 25% stake in Turo, that rental car. It's like the Airbnb for cars. And then
they still have that?
Yeah, and they own the Daily Beast. So they basically said at a recent conference they're getting rid of everything else except People Inc.
First, they don't own that. By the way, they don't own the Daily Beast anymore. That's not true.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, it's like, it's a joint. I mean, okay.
Yeah, but
I mean, it's jointly owned
they're selling it right now. That's what they said at the conference. And so they actually acquired this stake back in MGM back in 2020 and have accumulated the stock over time. MGM has this like super aggressive share buyback program. So they bought in, and they only own like 13%. But over time, because MGM was buying so much of its stock back, that 13% went to 26% over the last 6 years. And then at a recent conference, because they're getting rid of like the holding co structure, and like a lot of the executives that were duplicative with People Inc. are going away. So IAC, People Inc. itself, is going to save $40 million a year just on corporate costs. And then this purchase with MGM, when they first bought it, they talked about, and I think a lot of stuff has come true, iGaming has been a big thing. It continues to grow both in the US and globally. MGM owns some of the best properties in Las Vegas, and they have also a really strong portfolio in Asia. So they own a casino in Macau, and then they're developing something in Japan. I guess that's pretty unique. So yeah, I think their current stake is worth like $2.6 billion. They need another $3 billion. They're not going to buy everything. It sounds like they want current stakeholders to roll over, like the big ones. So they're going to buy up to 51% to consolidate the revenue and earnings.
Okay, but these businesses have nothing to do with each other, right? I mean, like IAC was a conglomerate, like at the end of the day, and it wasn't like there was, you know, synergies. And now it's just like two different assets, but that there's no like sort of necessarily like overlap between the two.
No, I mean, I think when they had a portfolio, they looked at things that were like interesting digital consumer businesses. So I think what this speaks to is like they haven't found anything like that. They've been basically deconstructing the portfolio, spinning things off and selling them over the last few years. And MGM, they're simplifying their operations, and MGM happened to be valued at a relative like normal value, like their offer price is at 7 times EBITDA. And for them, I think they see it as like something with a moat. Like I said, the real estate in Las Vegas, not the physical real estate, but like where the casinos are, it's some of the most premium. I think they see it as like, and this has been reported as like a hedge against AI, because people are going to still keep gambling. They're going to still keep going on vacation. Yeah.
Well, AI is compressing their other main asset.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like they've done a really good job. I'm going to be speaking to Neil Vogel at Cannes. So to come to that, going to be joined by Sarah Fisher from Axios. We do this. It's like a bit of a tradition. I think this is the fourth year that we've done this. And so I'm going to be pressing Neil on this, but he's very deft, so I don't know if I'll land anything. But like,
they're creative on their reporting. They're creative on their reporting too. When you look at like how People Inc. reports some of the non-traffic revenue, they group in a couple things that allow it to seem bigger than it actually is, I think.
Like what?
I knew you were going to ask. I don't know. This is like from you shared a press release like 4 months ago, and I was like, oh, they're including like 3 other types of revenue in this to make it seem much bigger. So
yeah. Well, I mean, you got to dress those things up. But I think, to me, like it just says like where, look, you have to like show that you're not tied to page view models now. I mean, nobody wants that. That's why I'm interested to see what happens, say, to like a Daily Beast. They've done, from everything I know of it, they've done a good job of reorienting that business since Joanna Coles and who Ben Sherwood took over.
It's a perfect foil in the Trump administration, right? They have good websites doing well. They have, I think, podcasts and video that are doing well. So I think that business is profitable. But I think longer term, the new IC, the People Inc. is focused on People Inc. and then they'll have this 51% stake in MGM. And it goes back to like what a holding company is supposed to do, which is allocate capital in like an efficient manner where they think assets are undervalued, and ultimately they expect, because MGM just can throw off cash. And so the parent co, People Inc. can either buy back stock, do dividends, things like that. And so I think they just saw this as a unique way of allocating additional capital. Caesars Inc. just got taken private by one of the Las Vegas families. So I think there's a perception that these assets are undervalued in the public market.
Right. But like, they're not taking this capital and saying, we're gonna buy up all kinds of content assets to be the number one content suppliers to AI. Like, I could see that as a strategy, right? But it's not the one that they're taking. They're looking to diversify.
Yeah. I mean, I think it says a lot to where a holding company that owned a lot of these consumer brands that tried to make marketplaces on the internet is now going to one of the oldest industries, gambling, right? It kind of speaks volumes to like
prostitution, then gambling. I think that was the order, right?
But if they've gone
then banking, actually.
If they've gone from owning Match and all these different ways of getting consumers to enter a marketplace and spend money to now going back to physical things, I think it speaks volume to like where, because they could have bought Pinterest, they could have done a lot of different things with the capital. I think they see this as like a pretty well, like a value buy. And the good thing is they don't have to buy it all. They're only basically doubling their current stake. Here's one thing that people should do. So there's all these friendly soccer matches right now that are like inexpensive.
Yeah.
So
because like Americans generally are not like crazy about soccer.
Yeah. But the World Cup games are really expensive, but there's a bunch of friendly matches where Ticketmaster can now sell tickets. So if you want to actually go see, if you actually want to go see a soccer game with some of these country teams, like the next 2 weekends, I think it's like this weekend and next weekend, there's a bunch of these matches happening, and it's not going to have the best players, but it will have people. So
it'll have people, people good at soccer.
It'll have soccer players.
You won't know the difference anyway. You're not a soccer fan. You're gonna be impressed. AB, tell me about, you were recently at a YouTube ecosystem event put on by Colin and Samir. It's called Press Publish. What was the vibe there?
It was good. So it was last week in LA. They got Fox to give them the entire or one of the backlots. So basically where Fox films its shows. So like these massive kind of hangar warehouses. And then they had different activations along one of the streets that looked like New York. And it was 500 people. You had to apply 75% creators, 25% people in the industry. And I think what's unique about, like, I've been to a couple YouTube video focused conferences in the last month. And I think I find them energizing because you have a lot of real executives going. It's not just like a company forcing some mid-level person to go there and sit and take random notes. Like, you actually have people that are making investments, CEOs of companies, operators, things like that. So,
yeah, I'm interested because like it sounds like there's a lot more energy in this. I mean, there's just more energy in something like the YouTube ecosystem than there would be at, I don't know, what's the NAB or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's the direction things are going. So and YouTube itself is a massive economy. And also, good job using a non-traditional venue. You know, I think as a lot of people pile into event formats need innovation. I mean, we spoke about the semaphore world economy. You know, it's more obviously they're going to have it in a traditional venue, but the format was a little bit different. And my thing is, too many events are doing too many of the same formats. And I understand the reasons that they do the same formats in the same locations. New York is terrible for events. It's just awful because the infrastructure in New York is you basically end up in like an auditorium or a hotel ballroom. It's terrible.
I think the weird thing for event organizers that's hard for them to get comfortable with is like, yes, you need the programming and the main stage with panels and interviews, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, the value is the hallways, right? And so I went to the Scalable conference, which is like these two women who used to be writers at larger organizations and now have their own Substack. And their venue was good because like it was weighted. It was like half the people inside watching the content and half the people outside just having conversations.
Yeah.
Really. Same thing with the Fox thing is like, yes, they wanted you to be watching the content, but there's enough room and enough places to sit and talk to people. So
yeah. That's why it's like when I hear live journalism, particularly in like, you usually hear from business news places, I'm like, okay, yeah, everyone wants to do DealBook and that's great. But the reality is most people are not going to be able to pull off a DealBook type conference, and you got to focus on the value. The Time Center is the Time Center is a terrible venue because it's made for quote unquote live journalism. There aren't very good places for networking. I went to an event there and it was like incredibly awkward because most of the action takes place outside of the main sessions. I would be doing sessions at Digiday events in front of like a half empty over air conditioned ballroom, like constantly. The real action was it was at the pool bar. It was around the cocktails and around the croissants, like at the breakfast table, and then at the cocktail parties. I would always tell like my team on editorial, I'm like, look, don't get this wrong. Like what you do is incredibly important here. But if we don't get the cocktail parties right, this event is not going to succeed because our job is to match up ultimately a buy and a sell side and match people together. That's the networking is always going to be most of the value at these events.
Yeah. And you're not going to do that sitting watching you talk to you're not going to do that sitting in the audience. I think what's unique about the Press Publish event and the Scalable one is like they're led by like the gravitas of the people interviewing the people on stage like that. That's how they're getting the good guests, but it's also helping really fill out like a well-rounded audience. I think in the Press Publish thing, like it was, you had to apply and then they would accept you, which I think helped have like a pretty well-rounded creator audience. And
well, I think the problem that people get into is they want the sponsorship dollars and then they want the tickets too. Like, and the normal thing is like, okay, use the tickets to cover your hard costs and then your sponsorship dollars or your margin. And and I understand that. I want to do that too with an event in the fall. Yeah. But the problem ends up being you're working against yourself in some ways, because if you're selling the composition of the room, the tickets are going to often work against that because you're going to have too many providers, basically. I mean, it's not that different. A lot of these events to me, it's like kind of like a nightclub model. You know, and the ladies would always drink free before midnight for a reason, you know, because ultimately you need the right composition in rooms.
Did you go to the Substack thing last week?
I did not. I missed it. It was at a non-traditional venue. I mean, they spent a lot of money on it from what could tell. It was in some like townhouse or something of that. It's funny when I see like people do events for marketing purposes versus like for margin purposes, and they're vastly different.
Yeah, but to your point, New York is like the worst place to host. There's just not, the rooms suck. The problem with the New York Times Center is like when you walk into that auditorium, you always feel awkward if you go in when something started because of the way you have to enter, and then leaving sucks too.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was not designed networking first, and it shows. But you don't have a lot of options in New York. Yeah, somewhere like London, you have a lot of non-traditional options. It's way better. New York, you don't have options, and then they're incredibly expensive, as everything is in New York. So that's why I spent a lot of time at resorts in my previous life, because we stopped doing events in New York City because the money did not make sense. We were paying insane amounts of money for coffee. I mean, for boxed lunches, it was like $70 a boxed lunch. Terrible. Let's just do a quick good product. I mean, Troy is not here, which is difficult because this is his segment. But I took a little bit of a road trip last weekend with my Serbian in-laws. I feel like they need, they only go to like New York or Miami, and they don't see real America. So I know you're a real America guy, so I wanted to like take them to real America. So I took them on a road trip to the Florida Keys, and
Nice.
we went to Key Largo, which is right outside. It's right near Miami, but it's like the Keys have an entirely different culture to them. Because when you go to the Keys,
old people that are like swingers.
they do. That's Key West. That is Fantasy Fest, which actually after 9/11, for some reason, like I lost my job and like I went on a road trip and we ended up in Key West accidentally during Fantasy Fest. And that is true. It's not just, that's a different segment, but the Keys do have a weird culture. It's like a lot of like, older middle-aged people. It's very like fishing oriented, sport fishing, and sport fishing has its own culture. A lot of baseball hats with the wraparound sunglasses on top of the brim. You know that look? You must see that look around.
Bud Light,
right?
cheap mixed drinks. So do they like it?
They loved it, right? And I think what they liked was that we went to one of those like fish places on the water. And I think those are a great product for the summer. You find them and I'm thinking about the ones on like the eastern shore of Maryland. I don't know if you have them out in California, but like you eat on the water, you have fresh fish, you order at a window, you carry a tray to your table. In the eastern shore, you're going to crack open like crabs or something like this. And then you sit out and you have some cold beer and you eat fish. And I think it's a great product.
But how much of that fish in Florida is fried?
I mean, you can get fried fish, but by the way, a grouper sandwich was $30. Like, I don't know what's going on with pricing here. I'm like, how in the world is this grouper sandwich $30?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I think the nice thing on the East Coast, like in the Northeast, is you have like fresh lobster rolls and things like that are tasty that you order from the truck.
There's this culture everywhere. I think it's a great part of American summers. The other sort of companion good product that Troy had mentioned is, I've never been to one, but summer is a time for road trips, right? And a lot of people drive. That's why gas prices are going to make people increasingly pissed off before the midterms. And one of the things with a road trip is, where do you stop? And I'm fascinated by Buc-ee's. Have you ever been to a Buc-ee's?
I've seen them. I haven't been to it. It's in Texas, right?
So they're a Texas chain of rest area. It's gas, but it's more. It's an entire emporium. These things are massive. It's Texas, right? So they have up to 100 gas pumps in a Buc-ee's. And then they sell brisket. They sell like home furnishings. You can buy a machete there. You can buy all kinds of outdoor equipment. They make fudge on premises, and they're known for their quirky, they have a mascot that greets you at the door.
It's a person in a costume?
Yeah. They have a mascot.
Holy shit. Wow. It's like a Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah. This kind of quirkiness is perfect for branding. And like and what's incredible not incredible, but like they're still owned by their founders. The Super Texas guy who, like, two guys who started this chain, never sold it, never went to private equity. And, you know, they're continuing to run this. They're expanding it beyond Texas. It's already in Alabama and other states. I think it's going to North Carolina soon. It might not, it's a little kitschy as a brand, but incredible loyalty. And I would add this, they have a great reputation for everyone at Buc-ee's, their employees being incredibly friendly. And that's because, guess what? They pay them well and they treat them well. And that helps. And so I'm eager to eventually, I hope I don't have to drive across Texas to do this, but to visit a Buc-ee's, because I think it's a great brand story.
Nice. I have to say, I did a road trip in my Tesla that it sucks because you're stopping way too much.
They have chargers too.
Yeah.
Like they're not just doing gas.
Yeah. What happens when you get into the road trip mode with a Tesla is that to charge the last 30% takes the longest. And so the way that it sets up is like you're basically charging from like 10 to 60%. So it's only like 10 minutes, but you're stopping every 2 hours. And then you appreciate having a gas car so much more. I got to check out a Buc-ee's.
Okay, AB, thank you. We're going to leave it there. Going to wrap up PvA and PvA OT.
That's it for this episode of People vs. Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.